And call the meeting to order. Thanks to those of you who are in the room for joining us tonight. We will start with, sorry, I got to go to the first page. An invocation, which we observe by a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, thanks. Next up, clerk, will you call the roll?
Agent.
Here.
Clegg.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Sanchez.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Woodings. 5 present, 1 absent.
Just, I want to, just a second. Was Holly calling in or she's not?
I thought she was.
Can we see if Holly, if Councilmember Woodings is online?
She is not, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Will you let us know for the record if and when she arrives?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thanks. Okay, and with that, we'll move on to request for approval of the council minutes from both the work session and evening meeting of October 5th.
Madam Mayor,
Yes,
I move approval of the city council minutes of the work session and regular evening meeting of October 5th, 2021.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Agent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes,
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson. Woodings, she has joined us online, Madam Mayor.
there
Wonderful.
she is.
Great. Welcome. All right.
Would you like me to see if she wanted to vote on the minutes, Madam
Sure.
Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Woodings, would you like to vote on the minutes?
Yes, you were a little bit faster than I was, sorry.
You're good.
Motion carries.
Right, and now under special business, we have revised findings for CUP 21-33.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. As you'll recall, back on September 21st, you approved a request for a special exception to operate a nail salon on a property located at 11885 West Overland Road in a single-family residential zone. At that time, you did direct us to return with findings and conditions of approval that included limiting the facility to employees that reside on the property and then to 2 stations. So included in your packet was the reason statement and conditions reflecting that decision. And so we are asking that you adopt those this evening. Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Go ahead.
I reviewed the reason statement and particularly the background section that Cody's team prepared, and it is certainly what we discussed and what I intended. So I would move approval of CUP 2133, the revised findings on the nail salon issue.
Second,
Madam Mayor.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and then Councilmember, are you asking to speak?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I did vote no on this one, but the revised findings are consistent with what we heard the meeting, so I'm able to vote yes on this.
All right, clerk, will you call the roll?
Agent.
Yes.
Clegg.
yes,
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson. Woodings.
Yes,
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And next up, we have the consent agenda. All items with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered in its normal sequence.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
before Councilmember Sanchez goes, I would like to move that we defer resolution 47821 to a date certain of October 19th due to a delay with the closing documents.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Clerk?
Agent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes,
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson. Woodings.
yes,
All in favor, motion carries.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to pull from the consent agenda Resolution 48421, a resolution affirming the City of Boise City's commitment to fostering and valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion and providing an effective date.
second,
All right, we have a motion. Was that just to pull it?
Or
We don't
do
need,
we
we
have to
could
have a
just,
motion or is it just?
nope, it's just a
consent?
request.
Just a request.
So what we'll do is now, why don't we hear a motion to pass the consent agenda without 48421?
Thank you.
And then we'll pick up 48421.
Okay, Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda with deferral of resolution 478 and with the opportunity for discussion on the diversity resolution.
Second,
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Thank you. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes,
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
yes,
Thompson, Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, and now we will pick up resolution 48421.
thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I would just like to thank you, Mayor, Council President Clegg, for her assistance in helping us put this resolution together. And of course, my colleagues on the city council present and the folks who were here 2018 and 2019 when we started this work to create a strategic plan for diversity, inclusion, and equity at the city of Boise. It is work that is ongoing, and the purpose of this resolution is to give direction to our staff moving forward with the next phase of this work. So with that, I would like to read the resolution. Resolution number 484-21, a resolution informing the city of Boise's commitment to fostering and valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and providing an effective date. Whereas the city of Boise recognizes that residents from all backgrounds are a vital part of our community, bringing fresh perspectives and new ideas, starting businesses, and contributing to the vibrant, diverse community that we all value. And whereas the city of Boise recognizes that diversity strengthens the health and vibrancy of our community and helps shape our workforce. This diversity encompasses people of color, people with disabilities, people of different faiths, nationalities, beliefs, and cultural views, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, age, family status, and more. And whereas the city of Boise is committed to being an employer that values and embodies these beliefs, where honest, deep, and transformative growth is valued and spurs action to ensure that diversity, equity, and inclusion is integrated in all that we do. And whereas we empower our staff to act and will provide the necessary resources in order for them to do so. This includes, but is not limited to, developing and supporting a diverse workforce, to foster a culture of inclusion through ongoing training opportunities and creation of clear paths for advancement through professional development programs and peer mentoring opportunities, ensuring a healthy work environment. And whereas the city of Boise values and seeks employees who are innovative and willing to take risks, to be audacious and self-aware leaders who bring forward creative ways to do business and how they interact with one another and in the way we deliver services to our community. And whereas the city of Boise is committed to creating and supporting processes, policies, and procedures that not only meet the needs of our employees today, but that are meant to grow and evolve as we move forward as an organization. It is our intention that this remain an ongoing process in our operations, be it resolved by the Mayor and Council of the City of Boise, Idaho. Section 1, that the City Council intends to lead by example in this area and will join with our employees in this important and necessary work now and into the future. Section 2, that the City of Boise wants all our employees to know that they belong, that we want them to thrive in our organization, and that we support them in bringing their best selves to the work that they do for the city and our community, and that they play a crucial role in shaping the future of our city. Section 3, that we request the mayor's office report back to council regularly on procedure, internal structure, or functions related to this work, and work with the council on budget and policy changes needed to make the city of Boise a better employer.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
We don't have, do we have a motion on the table yet?
I so move.
Second. Madam Mayor?
We have a motion, a second, and yes, conversation.
Thank you. In talking to the employees at the city, it's clear to me that they would like this direction, and that they believe that they'll be better able to follow through on this work with that direction and support from City Council. And applaud Councilmember Sanchez for seeing this through, and will be supporting the motion.
Madam Mayor. I know a lot of work went into this from our staff, from your office, and I really do appreciate the staff being willing to push this forward. I think that we do want them to be able to show up for their best selves every single day. And I appreciate the direction from the mayor, from council president, and especially Council Pro Tem Sanchez for pushing this forward and making this a priority at the city. And I'm so excited to support it. Good job.
Madam Mayor. In 2018, when I had the huge privilege and honor of joining this body, during my swearing-in ceremony, I made a point to talk about what life is like as a person of color being born in this country. And for me, it was not being immediately given over to my mother as her child because our skin color didn't match. And the reason I did that is I wanted my colleagues to know why this is an important issue for me. And it's something that I've worked on all my adult life. It started when I was a freshman at Boise State University in 1989. The first time, to my knowledge, I was referred to as a spick. And it guided my work from then on, because I don't think hurt feelings should be wasted. And I thought it was important as a student at Boise State, where I was going to learn a vocation, that it was also important that we learn how to be with each other so that we don't harm each other and we create opportunities for us to bring the best of ourselves forward, not intimidated or feeling that we don't belong. Because when you feel like you belong, you are released from this anxiety and stress, and you can focus on creating amazing things in this world. And that's all I've ever wanted in this work. As a student leader at Boise State, when I worked on creating a requirement that we add multiculturalism to our graduation requirement, it eventually happened in 2005, and it's now known as University Foundations at Boise State. And in my work as a civil rights investigator with the Idaho Human Rights Commission, I've always looked for ways for us to be better with each other in service to the community. And so I'm so excited and grateful to our staff, who I know are going to embrace this opportunity to work better with each other and to create that environment where we can bring the best of ourselves to work every day. And so I thank all of our staff for welcoming that opportunity.
All right. I don't plan to vote, but I just want to say that I really appreciate the council's commitment to this, and our staff does as well. This signal from each of you is important to them as they continue to do everything they can to make our city government as a place to work incredible and welcoming, diverse, reflective of this community. And in that way, we get the best and the brightest and the best ideas to serve our residents. And so I appreciate your commitment. I'm also proud to work alongside each of you, and because of your commitment, and of course, very proud of our employees' commitment to this work as well. Boiseans value diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's made clear in the conversations that we have through listening sessions, in discussions with employees that we've hired, ones that are thinking about working for our community, and residents who often will show up here echoing the importance of ensuring that we're a community that welcomes everyone. And so appreciate the work that was done on this, the signal that it sends not only to our staff, but to the community, and the work that we do together to make sure moving forward, we are as welcoming a place and as reflective a place as our community is. Is that clerk?
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson, Woodings,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
If I could take just a moment of personal privilege. Lisa, thank you for your commitment to this. I'm not sure it would have happened as soon as it did without it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we have no ordinances. We did the consent agenda, right?
Yes,
Yeah, okay. We have no ordinances on first and second reading or third reading, but we do have one on first, second, and third reading.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move that all rules of the council interfering with the immediate consideration of ordinance 4421 be suspended, that the portions of Idaho Code 5902 requiring an ordinance to be read on 3 different days, twice by title and once in full, be dispensed with, and that the records show it has been read for the 3rd time in full.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes,
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson, Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries. ORD 44-21. An ordinance CAR 21-00013, property located at 6259 South Pleasant Valley Road, annexing 121 acres of certain lands and territory situated in Ada County, Idaho, adjacent and contiguous to the corporate limits of the city of Boise City, establishing and determining the land use classification of said 121 acres as M-1D DA, light industrial with design review and development agreement, and C-1D DA, neighborhood commercial with design review and development agreement, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such annexation and zone change, directing the city engineer to lodge and file a legal description and map for said annexed lands and territory, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Auditor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission, providing that a copy of said legal description and map of said annexed lands and territory be recorded with the Ada County Recorder and filed with the Ada County Assessor and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and provide an effective date.
Madam Mayor, I move we approve ordinance 4421.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, clerk, will you call the roll?
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes,
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson, Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Next up, we'll move into subdivisions. We just have one this evening, and we will, it looks like Cody is here to present. The applicant, is the applicant here in person or online? Mr. Delgado?
Madam Mayor, he is online.
Okay. So, and then we don't expect the West Valley Neighborhood Association, but Jim or someone from West Valley, if you're online, will you let us know? And typically with subdivisions, we'll hear from staff, the applicant, oh, Ms. Delgado, excuse me. The applicant can let us know if you're in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report, and we'll take it from there. Cody, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. This is a request for preliminary and final plat approval for a subdivision that includes 1 common and 9 buildable lots on just under 1 acre parcel. The property is located at 2393 North Wildwood Street. For those unfamiliar with the area, it's about a quarter mile southeast of Redwood Park in West Boise. The property is zoned R1C, or single family residential, that allows up to 8 units an acre. As you can see on the vicinity map, much of the surrounding area, or the majority of the surrounding area, has already been developed at suburban densities. In terms of the project itself, again, it includes 9 buildable lots. 1 of those lots at the front of the site will be occupied by an existing single-family home that will be retained. The remaining lots, and that lot will also allow for the retention of a number of existing mature trees that exist on site. The remaining 8 lots will be occupied by attached townhomes. Those homes will take access from a shared service drive along the eastern side of the site. That drive does include an attached sidewalk that will be connecting to attached sidewalk along that small segment of Wildwood. And that is consistent with the attached sidewalks on both sides of the subject property. So with that, the project does meet or exceed all objective standards of the development code. We remain unaware of opposition from any service provider for the property. And so with that, consistent with the commission's action, we are recommending approval of the subdivision this evening. Thank you.
Are there any questions for staff?
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Cody, it looks like there could be an opportunity to connect a pedestrian path to the road behind us, Springland Avenue. Was there any consideration for that?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, unfortunately, lesson learned. That project I was actually looking at and preparing back in 1999, the way that was platted, there's actually 3 or 4 feet, it's actually 2.59 feet separation from the corner of that old property or the property that's before us tonight and the right of way there. So you would be going through, it hits the corner of those 2 adjacent private residential lots. So in short, no.
Can we at least make sure that there's a cross-access easement if there ever becomes available?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, we could certainly require that to show up on the subdivision plat. And then if we were able to work something out in the future with those 2 owners, it's in place.
If you measure it, a child who lives in that corner and wanted to visit a friend over on Shamrock would have to walk nearly a third of a mile to get there instead of 500 feet. So if we could at very least do that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, and if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and hear from the applicant. One, perhaps you could answer the council president's question in what you've got to say, and we'll go from there.
Hello, my name is Jory Delgado. I am with JBI Elemental. I am in agreement with all of your guys' conditions of approval. So I don't have anything else to present tonight. But as far as the walkway in that far corner, we would be open to that if it was something that we could work out later on down the road. But like you said, we haven't really looked into that, but we can definitely look into that if that is something that you guys want to add to the conditions of approval.
Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? All right, is the West Valley neighborhood present?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, is anybody here to testify in this item? Anybody online?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, with that, I'll close the public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I move that we deny the appeal of PUD 21-24 and uphold the decision of the, oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one.
There you go. But just for the record,
I
you popped up
apologize.
the
I'll
next
start
item,
over.
but your question related to the sidewalk was indeed related to this item we're covering.
Yeah, it was. I apologize. I was on the right one until I started reading that. I turned the paper over. Madam Mayor, I move that we approve Atrium Heights subdivision SUB 2140 Boise City preliminary and final plat with the addition of a condition to require a access agreement in the southwest corner should access ever be available.
Okay.
We have a motion and second. Further discussion? All right, clerk, will you call the roll?
Bajent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And next up, we move into the public hearing portion. I'll start with presenters, then applicants, unless it's an appeal, that'll be a little different. And then we'll go through folks. I'll check in on to see who here is in person to testify on the items, and then we'll go to the online folks that have called in. And with that, welcome. The
Thank
first
you.
item is the urban renewal plan for State Street.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. I'd like to introduce the team that's with me tonight on CCDC's behalf for this State Street Urban Renewal Plan. So Matt Edmond is behind me. Matt will be giving the presentation to Council tonight. Also here is Megan Conrad on the legal side of things. And then online, we have Karen Kay from SB Friedman. So with that, I'll pass it over to Matt. Thank you.
Welcome, Matt.
Hi, Madam Mayor and City Council. Matt Edmond, Capital City Development Corporation. Thanks for having me this evening. I'll be talking you through the State Street Urban Renewal Plan and answering any easy questions you have. The hard ones I will hand off to Megan and Karen. So the State Street study area, it spans approximately 6 miles from 27th Street in the east to Horseshoe Bend Road in the west, encompassing 577 acres. That is inclusive of right-of-way and 668 parcels. It is based on the study area that was laid out in the eligibility study that the City Council approved back in 2019, directing CCDC to move forward with an urban renewal plan for State Street. The red circles are primary transitory and development nodes as identified in the 2019 State Street TOD plan. The yellows are secondary nodes. So real quick, urban renewal plan objectives, and these are on, I believe, page 13 of the plan. So we basically grouped it into these 5 categories so that transit-oriented development to encourage private development that is supportive of and supported by transit, improve conditions for walking, biking, and transit through public investment in streets, utilities, public spaces, transit facilities, and other public infrastructure. Mixed-use development, promoting mixed-use residential, retail, commercial, and office development along the corridor that is oriented toward and provides economic, educational, recreational, and residential opportunities for surrounding neighborhoods. Open space, securing and improving public open space and recreational facilities where needed. Increase the supply of affordable and workforce housing along the State Street corridor. And then lastly, preservation and adaptive reuse to encourage redevelopment strategies that employ historic preservation and adaptive reuse of culturally significant sites and structures where feasible. So one of the questions I've gotten a lot in the last couple of years is why urban renewal? Why do we need it? We're seeing plenty of development in Boise right now. And so the top line is to deliver development outcomes with significant public benefit, which the market would not otherwise deliver on its own. Below there are some sub-bullets. Mixed use development, mixed income, affordable housing. Those are generally pretty hard to do, to make pencil or get financing for without some assistance, extra push there that urban renewal can provide. Provide landscape buffers. Obviously, the highway district controls most of the roadways. They do not do things like landscape buffers in the absence of a cost share agreement, so we could pick that up. Parks and public space and pathways. These are things we can be a bit more nimble on than a capital improvement plan with parks and recreation. Providing local streets and access management. Hopefully that's the carrot to the stick provided by ACHD and ITD. In terms of controlling that access to arterial roadways like State Street. Historic preservation, as I mentioned in an earlier bullet on plan objectives. Structured parking like we have downtown, 6 public parking structures owned and all are in part by CCDC. Potentially could be some out here, maybe at the ITD campus should it redevelop or elsewhere. Site remediation, there are a number of brownfield sites out here. And as we've participated in some remediation downtown before, potentially out there to make those challenged properties developable. And then lastly, local matching funds for federal aid grants that may come up for VRT or some other public agency. So we did a fair amount of public and stakeholder engagement as much as could be expected, given the reality we're currently living through. The CCDC State Street website went up on or about June 1st of last year. It continues to be up with a number of documents on it and other information. We had an open house and survey in fall of 2020, ran from October 16th to November 13th, asking respondents how they use the State Street corridor, what their destinations are along it, barriers and suggested improvements. We followed that up with another survey asking them to prioritize based on a notional budget in the spring of 2021. It went live, I think, March 15th and was open till April 5th. And basically asked them to spend a notional budget on things like mobility improvements, placemaking and economic development. And then we followed that up in June of this year with a community forum kind of walking through what we suggested in the plan based on that input. We also met with every neighborhood association overlapping the district. There's 6 of them, either in person or virtually, and then presented to the Boise Metro Chamber Transportation Committee. We also did a fair amount of interagency coordination, not only with the city, Arts and History Department, Housing, Community Development, Comprehensive Planning and PDS, IT and Public Works, Parks and Recreation, as well as the Mayor's Office. And then the State Street MOU partners, that's transportation, land use, and transit agencies involved with the corridor. So the City of Boise, Garden City, Eagle, and Ada County Highway District, Idaho Transportation Department, and Valley Regional Transit. We also talked to Preservation Idaho. They had some concerns out here with and so as a result of that, we did a cultural resource survey and have a report on that. I believe there are 23 significant sites or structures out here that we identified. And I did present the Garden City Council earlier this year. The entire district is within the city of Boise, but obviously it's got a lot of adjacency with Garden City, so felt it was good to reach out to them. So one document you won't see in the plan, but it's not a plan attachment, but it did inform the plan and the feasibility study. It's a compelling vision of what we expect to see along State Street, what we would like to see, provides guidance for that 20-year term. It's not a regulatory document, but it does have some, best practices for urban building form, graphic layout of the projects that are listed in the feasibility study. So that is a document that's available on the CCDC State Street website. Now, getting into the plan, the legal requirements. So per Idaho Code 502905, an urban renewal plan shall include with specificity, first off, a 10% valuation test, and that compares the total assessed valuation of the base assessment against the total assessed valuation of all taxable property within the municipality. That's included in section 502.3 of the plan on page 31. So the adjusted base value of all urban renewal districts, including State Street at this time, is about 3.1% of Boise City taxable value. So we meet that. Next, a statement listing the kind, number, location of all proposed public works or improvements within the revenue allocation area. That's in section 301 and attachment 5 of the plan, which is the economic feasibility study, which is the next bullet. So again, that's attachment 5. List of estimated project costs, that's also in attachment 5, the feasibility study. Fiscal impact statement, the impact of the revenue allocation area upon taxing districts applicable to the area. And so that includes Boise City, Ada County, Boise School District, Ada County Highway District, Emergency Services, College of Western Idaho, mosquito abatement, and then a couple that may not be as familiar, Flood District 10 and Dry Creek Cemetery. That statement is in section 502.8 and also mentioned in attachment 5, the feasibility study. Description of the methods of financing of all estimated project costs and the timing, that's in section 501, as well as attachment 5, the feasibility study. Termination date, that's in section 800, it's December 31st, 2041. The district will continue to receive revenues into September of 2042. That's just the nature of the lag there with property tax. And then a description of the disposition or retention of any assets of the agency upon termination date. And that is also listed in section 800 of the plan. So you've heard me mention the feasibility study a lot. This is really a meat and potatoes. It's the engine of the plan, if you will. This was put together by SB Friedman Development Advisors, one of our consultants. It does cover items 2 through 6. So it meets the economic feasibility study plan requirement set forth in Idaho Code 502905. I mentioned a previous slide. It's an informed development scenario, which estimates revenues generated over the 20-year life of the plan or the district term, and views the costs required for public improvements originally identified in the infrastructure analysis. The list of public improvements includes a small number of unfunded public improvements, which could be paid for if the project area revenues overperform relative to forecasts, or if additional funding sources are available. So again, we've got the development program, what we expect to see over the 20-year life of the term. And I believe we're talking 2,600 multifamily, 1,100 single-family units, 362,000 square feet of commercial, 50,000 square feet of office, a modest size hotel. That goes into a revenue model. I'll be talking about that on a coming slide. And then project cost for all the infrastructure, which is Appendix 4 in that attachment. So here's what we expect to see in revenues. So just over 103 million in present value. Assumptions getting us there. So current growth in housing values to continue for a couple more years at a fairly ambitious amount, and then moderating down for a couple of years, stabilizing at about 2% annually thereafter. 100% value absorption the year after delivery of development in the district. A dynamic levy rate, and what that means is as the taxable value of everything in the city goes up, that levy rate will continue to drop. 4% discount rate, and then 4% interest rate on bonds. And the quarters here, so those are 5-year quarters. Obviously, first one 2023 to 2027, and the last one 2038 to 2042. So the cost to go against those revenues. You can see we have about 93.6 million in funded project costs. That's in present value, 2021 dollars. About 21.5 million in unfunded costs. And you have project categories here. They follow our CCDC strategies. So economic development, infrastructure, mobility, placemaking, and special projects. Real quick, economic development, things like fostering redevelopment of challenged parcels, promoting mixed use, mixed income development, most often through land acquisition and other incentives. Infrastructure, the vast majority of this is utilities, extension of water, sewer, fiber optic conduit, upgrading power capacity, potentially burying overhead lines and things like green stormwater. Mobility, transit facilities, multi-use pathways, local streets. Placemaking could be public spaces, plazas, parks, and then special projects. And this could be public amenities, historic preservation, and public art and cultural investments. So the process to date, on August 9th, the CCDC board approved the plan and framework for transmission to the city. September 10th, the plan was transmitted to the underlying taxing districts no later than that date. And the first publication of public hearing, notice of public hearing was then. September 13th, the Planning and Zoning Commission adopted Res 1-21, finding conformity with blueprint. September 24th was the second publication, and that brings us to today, since it's City Council public hearing and hopefully first reading, with second and third in the weeks to follow. Should the City Council see fit to approve the ordinance authorizing the district, we would get the plan transmitted and recorded and published before December 31st. And then in accordance with, I cannot remember the legislation at this point, but we would expect to have an agreement in place with the Highway District by September 1st of next year. Oh, Idaho Code 502908. So that concludes my presentation. I'll stand for any questions you have, and here's our recommendation.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. This is an exciting day. Been a long time since we had a new district, and we've never had a district that was focused on transit-oriented development. Thank you for your presentation and for the outreach. There's, at least from the contacts I have gotten on this, there's a lot of public support, where in the beginning there was some skepticism, I guess you'd say, about how this might work. So I really appreciate the hard work. So question for you, we've added as one of the purposes of these districts, mixed income affordable housing. And then when you look at the project list, we have infrastructure and we have placemaking, and we have special projects, and we have economic development. Does the mixed income affordable housing fit in one of those in particular, or all of them? Or was just curious how we would help in those transit nodes to ensure that some of the housing that gets built there will be affordable.
Madam Mayor, Councilwoman Clegg, that's a great question. So those 5 categories are our strategies. They're what's been laid out by our board. And I would say principally to get mixed income affordable housing, if we were to do it through a land acquisition and request for proposal process, that'd be under economic development. That's where the land acquisition is, where those funds have been slated. But certainly things like infrastructure, if there are utility mains that need to be extended and things like that, there are other costs across other categories that could offset, but primarily economic development under land acquisition.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor. Well, first of all, thank you for all the hard work that's gone into this. I know it's been a ton, and I know a lot of it's taken place during a pandemic and trying to figure out how to do all that stuff while engaging with people meaningfully. So that's really appreciated. And I got a lot of positive feedback as well towards the end, people that you continue to check in with. So again, really appreciated. I did get one note from Preservation Idaho in support of the plan, and thank you for the plan, and also sort of highlighting that the cultural part of the plan they felt was maybe more of a side note, not a central part of the plan. And I didn't know if any work had been done. It looks like that note maybe was received by you as well to incorporate it more fully into the plan.
Sure. So, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton. So we did commission a cultural resource survey that was done by Preservation Solutions. And it was finished up by Sherry Freemuth at JUB when Carrie unfortunately passed away last December and couldn't complete it. I believe there were 23 sites or structures, be they flumes, specific buildings, things like that, that were identified in it. I would say over half are at least mentioned in the framework. We have 1.9 million that's slated out of all the costless in the feasibility study, 1.9 million for historic preservation. And that's somewhat limited on what we can spend funds on, short of acquiring it. If it's a private property, private structure, we're limited to basically maybe doing a historic easement, facade easement for it. So I don't know. I feel like we did what we could, short of designating every single property for potentially acquisition or something. I think there are a lot of really notable structures out there that that probably should be preserved. Others, I just Matt Enman personally, I don't see where it's at, but certainly we'll continue to work with Preservation Idaho where opportunities exist. And also the vast majority, save the one big one, the ITD headquarters, the vast majority are in private ownership. And so while we can work with them to try to get some sort of, preservation status, it's really the owner's prerogative what they may want to do with it in the future. So.
Madam Mayor, just a quick follow-up. Matt, thank you for highlighting all those. It sounds like you said that about half of those are, how did you word it, incorporated into the plan?
They're listed in the framework plan. So things like the McConnell House, the Collister Post Office, the root cellar that's out on the Guthrie Stone property. I believe there are 3 irrigation structures, Farmers Union, Stewart Creek, or Stewart Gulch. I think there's a third one. It's eluding me now. So a lot of them are listed. Some are not explicitly listed. But we really tried to, if there was something out there that, we thought there was a good opportunity for it, we tried to acknowledge it in that framework.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it.
No. All right, it looks like there's nothing further at this moment, but don't go far. Thank you. So do we have anybody in the room here? We have nobody that signed up in advance. Anybody online?
No, Madam Mayor.
Anybody in the room here to testify on this topic? All right, so it looks as though no one is here to testify on this. Are there further questions for CCDC or staff?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
thank you. Hi, Matt. It's good to see you again. So I'm kind of a broken record when it comes to this. It is an exciting project, but as always, I think an area that our community is asking us to be ever more innovative about, and that is making sure that we do right by the people in our community who don't have the means to move when they're displaced, so that we can continue to grow our city. And so I'm just hoping that will be an area of innovation where we can be creative about how do we respect and honor life, whether it's at a lower socioeconomic level, folks who need the rest of us to advocate for them. So I'm just going to renew that call that we continue to be creative. I always see these moments as opportunities, and CCDC is full of very bright people. So I know we can do it. Thank you, Matt.
All right, well, if there's nothing further for staff or CCDC and nobody is here to testify, I'm going to go ahead and close this.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I ask unanimous consent that ordinance 4521 be read for the first time by number and title only and set for the second reading calendar.
Second.
Without exception. Wait, was that it was unanimous consent, right? Yeah.
Sorry.
without-
ORD-45-21, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Boise City, Idaho, approving the urban renewal plan for the State Street District Urban Renewal Project, which plan includes revenue allocation financing provisions, authorizing the city clerk to transmit a copy of this ordinance and other required information to county and state officials and other taxing entities, providing severability, approving the summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date.
That's it.
Right.
That's it. So did any council members want to make any comments today? Or are you saving it for the third reading? It looks like Councilmember Woodings might have something to say.
Madam Mayor, obviously, I'm extremely excited about this. I think a lot of folks know that my husband is the vice chair of CCDC, and so urban renewal is always a topic of discussion around our house. And I also want to note that neither one of us are developers. Neither one of us have any financial stake in urban renewal at all. We just really appreciate the way that it can really enhance our city in the ways that we envision our city growing. So this is a really exciting day, and I just want to give a round of applause to the CCDC staff and our city staff for all of the hard work and all of the outreach that they did to make this successful. So well done. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Many of you know that I've been pretty involved in the State Street corridor planning for a lot of years. the latest of that, besides this urban renewal district, is the transit-oriented development plan. If you look at that, it's a couple of exciting things to me. First, the electric buses that we just got delivered at Valley Regional Transit are running on the State Street corridor right now. And if you look at the renderings in that corridor plan, many of them depicted having electric buses there. So we're a little bit ahead of the game in terms of the kind of vehicles that we're using. For me, this is the really, besides the infrastructure of the roadway and the bus stops themselves, the last piece of the puzzle to ensuring that the State Street corridor actually can function as a high-capacity transit corridor in the future. And this plan will help with some of those roadway and bus stop enhancements, as well as the economic development and the other things that will make this a special place over time. And so thank you, everyone who's worked on this. This is an exciting day to actually have the tools in place now to complete the vision that's so long been desired along this corridor.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I grew up on old Highway 55 and State Street, right behind the sneaker station right there. So the very end of the line for this urban renewal district, and several places in the middle of that line, ever since. I know how much work went into this. This is a huge, huge thing, I think, for everyone in our city. And hopefully the lack of people here is a testament to support for this plan and the outreach that you did along the way. And I'm always a huge supporter of more outreach whenever we can do it. So again, I just want to thank you all for the hard work that you put into this, the engagement every single step of the way. And I'm really excited to see how this develops until 2042.
Madam Mayor, brief point. I just wanted to show my support as well. I've watched these districts and how they produce over the last 12 years on council, and it's really impressive to see what goes back into these areas and how it's dramatically improved. And so I want to thank you all, your staff and yourself, Matt, and Elaine, and everyone that's been involved with this, because this is a really unique and exciting CID, and I can't wait to see it in action. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for your comments, and this will be back before us for second and third reading in the weeks to come. And I want to thank CCDC, Matt in particular, on this one, for the work that you did on outreach, because that was really important that we seek as much resident engagement as possible. And I appreciate that CCDC took another look at that, came up with a more robust way to engage the public on this. And I agree with Councilmember Halliburton that I think the fruits of that are evident this evening. Really appreciate it. All right, thank you. Great to see you. We will now move on to the appeal of PUD 21-24. We've got Kevin. Welcome, Kevin, from PDS. And then we'll have, is the appellant here in person? Hello, welcome. And then we will have the applicant. Is the applicant here in person? Welcome, hello. And then we've got two parties of record, Christine Isaacs and Marcia Persley. I see Marcia. Is Christine here? Nope. Is anyone online?
I don't believe for this item.
All right. Well, so we will go ahead and get started. I think that it sounds as though everybody that's planning on talking on this topic is here in person, but we'll double check again online. And with that, thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Wait for this presentation to show up for you. Yep. So as you said, before you is an appeal of the Planning and Zoning Commission's approval of a request to modify a previously approved planned residential development in order to amend conditions regarding vegetation and the number and layout of proposed lots on approximately 85 acres over here at 7614 North Pierce Park Lane in an R1A zone. So the property comprised of these existing parcels shown here in red on the left runs along the south side of Pierce Park Lane as it heads up into the foothills. So back in 2015, the property received approval for a 95 lot planned unit development and associated subdivision and hillside applications. With that original PUD approval came the lot layout you see here and a significant list of conditions of approval. With this modification request, the applicant asked to slightly change the lot configuration and to modify a couple specific conditions related to the removal of vegetation. All other conditions of approval, including all of those related to the floodplain and erosion and sediment control, remain exactly the same and were not modified in any way. So the commissioners supported the requested changes as they ultimately would reduce the total number of lots as seen here and increase the amount of open space for the development. They also approved of the phased approach to the invasive plant removal as proposed by the applicant. So following this approval, the appellant submitted an appeal based on 4 grounds, paraphrased here. And so as discussed in your project report, most of these were related to the status of the floodplain as it runs through the property and how these approved modifications related to FEMA's review. So this property is a bit unique in that the actual location of the floodway and floodplain have not yet been mapped. So this process does require approval from FEMA and typically takes the route you see outlined here. With the approval of this PUD modification, the applicant would have their entitlements in order and they have submitted a conditional letter of map revision to FEMA, which has been approved. So really the next step here is to submit a floodplain development application to the city. So it'll be through that application that the appellant's concerns with the floodplains can be adequately reviewed and addressed. It's also important to note here that no grading, subdivision infrastructure, or construction permits can be issued until this floodplain development permit is issued. So in conclusion, and outlined in your project report, the planning team does not find that the grounds presented with this appeal show any errors with the commission's approval of the PUD modification. So therefore, we recommend that the appeal be denied and the original approval upheld. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Kevin? All right.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Kevin, when we first heard this, we heard many of the same concerns that we're hearing tonight, and we made the conclusion not to disturb the vegetation because of the floodplain. But just for the record, I've read the record. I read the as it came back to planning and zoning for the modification. It was clear to me that by removing the invasive species, there was an opportunity to actually improve the vegetation in the floodplain, which over time could create a better riparian area within the floodplain. Just want to make sure I was reading that correctly as I read the record and wanted to make sure that got in the record tonight.
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, that is correct. Those were the reasoning behind the removal of those pieces of vegetation there.
Okay, thank you. And then if I could follow up, the new application also removes the number of lots, which potentially hasn't gone through the FEMA review yet, but potentially makes it even easier to ensure that the floodplain isn't encroached on. Is that also true?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, that is also true.
Thank you.
All right. We will hear next from the appellant. Jeannie Hines, welcome.
Thank you. This is where you want me. And I understand I have 10 minutes.
And I'll ask you to start with your name. If you'd rather not read your address into the record, we've got it. So that's your choice.
I am Jeannie Hines, the appellant. I'm speaking on behalf of John Beecham, who is out of town. I live at 6779 North Pierce Park Lane, Boise. I'm a signatory on the appeal of the landscape plan. I'm presenting on behalf of the steering committee and concerned neighbors and friends of Pierce Gulch. Madam Mayor and members of the Boise City Council, we appreciate the opportunity to provide additional input into the process for approving the reserve of Deer Valley. What is easy to understand about the appeal of the landscape plan in this process is that we remain concerned with the impacts of this development on the site at Pierce Gulch and the impact on 11 downstream properties. We have voiced the same concern from the beginning of the process in 2015, and we are now even more concerned with the proposed modifications in the landscape plan. The basis for our appeal is that the Planning and Zoning Commission failed to fully assess the potential impacts of removing the conditions of approval relating to vegetation preservation in Pierce Gulch 3G, and therefore erred in their decision to approve modifications to the original plan as they put forth in this landscape plan. The landscape plan presented in August referred to unhealthy invasive species of vegetation for removal. In reference to the vegetation, we refer to Public Works memo by Jim Wiley in September of 2015 that states the vegetation at the site is in good condition. There is extensive riparian vegetation along creek boundaries, including a mixture of non-jurisdictional forested wetlands and emergent vegetation. Upland areas are also in good condition with ground covers of native grasses and sagebrush. The same memo includes official comments of city staff, including this one pertinent to our appeal, a recommendation to retain and protect riparian vegetation. Idaho Department of Fish and Game memo from the original annexation application in 1998 and reaffirmed in September of 2015 states, we strongly encourage retaining as much of the existing wetland riparian vegetation as possible for wildlife habitat. Native vegetation communities, including sagebrush, bunch grasses, and bitterbrush, should be protected. Protecting these vegetation communities is much easier, less expensive, and less detrimental to the environment than attempting to revegetate sites distributed by the development. The city of Boise form letter regarding floodplains states, quote, do not, however, remove vegetation that is actively growing on a stream bank. Streamside vegetation is tightly regulated by local, state, and federal regulations. The city council did recognize the importance of these factors when it required the developers to create a conservation easement and protect vegetation between both banks in the gulch, item 3G, in the conditions of approval in February of 2016. The landscape plan approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission in August does not conform to this requirement. The landscape plan currently proposes to remove non-native tree, shrub, and understory species from the gulch, which will alter the flood hazard code 3.1 by destabilizing the banks of the gulch, increasing sedimentation flows onto downstream property owners, and result in higher flows that will raise the base flood elevation at the west end of the development. We believe the city council placed the conditions of approval to intentionally support Boise City Code 1107, 08, and 09 of the Hillside and Foothill Ordinance and Flood Hazard Code. These conditions were placed as a result of concerns voiced by neighbors and city staff. The Planning and Zoning Commission was in error by modifying a condition and submitting the landscape plan without applying the 100-year flood designation by FEMA. Furthermore, the 2017 FEMA conditional letter of revision, the CLOMAR, which was based on the original development plan, assumed a roughness coefficient that was predicated on maintaining the vegetation composition and structure in the gulch. The changes proposed in the landscape plan approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission alters the entire logic of the FEMA analysis. The landscape plan, while perhaps an overall improvement to the original, has not been studied and certified. A floodplain application permit was not processed concurrently with the proposed landscape plan as required by Boise City Code 1103-18-5. The Boise City Council approved the preliminary plan for the reserve at Deer Valley without processing the flood plan permit at the same time. The project is clearly in the Pierce Gulch floodplain and subject to the requirements of the Boise Code 1108 flood hazard regulations and Hillside and Foothills Ordinance. Boise City Code requires that the floodplain administrator shall perform the following: to determine whether the development is within the floodway or floodway fringe. The administrator shall disclose to the commission and the city council whether the development is in or not in compliance with chapter 110807. It also requires the administrator to make interpretations of the location of the floodway and floodway fringe on the property. We believe this is an essential step for Planning and Zoning Commission and Boise City Council to fully assess the potential for flooding and sediment transfer onto downstream properties from the proposed development. We believe we are in agreement that the development plan is changed with the landscape plan modification. The Boise City Code has clear requirements for the planned unit development outlined in the foothills, hillside, and flood hazard code. We believe the Planning and Zoning Commission did not consider the basis for the City Council's conditions for approval and treated the proposed changes as a landscaping issue rather than being guided by flood hazard regulations, hillside and foothill ordinances and Boise City Code and the FEMA 100-year flood designation. In summary, the specific flood hazard regulations must be applied to this landscape plan as John Beecham presented in his testimony to the Planning and Zoning Commission in August. The reactions must occur: concurrent processing of the development proposals with the Boise City floodplain permit, determination of flood boundaries by the floodplain administrator, a report from planning staff regarding compliance or non-compliance with Boise City Code. In addition to Boise Code, we will cite FEMA regulations for Zone A in Code of Federal Regulations 60.3 flood management criteria for flood-prone areas. Zone A is a mapped special flood hazard area but has no determined base flood elevations or floodway. What FEMA requires for our type of community, type B, is 1, every development proposal such as the landscape plan must have a related permit. As stated previously, the required floodplain application permit was not processed concurrently with the submitted landscape plan. 2, every development proposal must be evaluated on this question: is the development proposal reasonably safe from flooding? 3, every development proposal must contain base flood elevation so the height of the 100-year flood is clearly depicted. As downstream property owners, we would prefer that the City Council require the developers to use current data to support the development plan rather than data from a flood study completed in 2017. In conclusion, this request, the Boise City Council, is to uphold the appeal and deny the modification, the landscape plan, until all the appropriate site inventory and analysis work is completed and is current. Finally, as you know, risk travels downstream, and this fact is the basis of our concern and our appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Any questions?
Madam Mayor,
Go ahead.
Ms. Hines, thank you. Hopefully it's a very easy question. This appeal has, or the application has 2 parts. One is the configuration of the lots. They want to remove a few lots. And then the second is the vegetation
Yes.
issue. And do I understand correctly that you, the appellants, don't have concerns with the lot configuration issue, but it is the vegetation issue that you're most concerned with?
Madam Mayor and Councilman, we do have concerns. However, we have been instructed that our appeal must address the vegetation issues and not the number of lots.
Okay, fair enough. So at any rate, you're addressing the vegetation issues and not the
Yes.
number of lots tonight.
Yes.
Thank you.
I have my own personal opinion about the number of lots.
Fair enough.
Up Pierce Park Lane. Thank you.
I think we've got a couple more questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just quickly, and I'll ask the applicant the same thing. There are in fact some invasive black locusts in the gulch. And ultimately removing them and replacing them with more native plants will be better in the long run for the floodway. Do you agree with that? Or do you think that those black locusts should be just allowed to stay there until they naturally pass?
Madam Mayor and Councilwoman, We have discussed this at length, and of course, the invasive species also have quite extensive root systems that stabilize the sediment and the bank of this project. And so our recommendation is to trim those and really preserve the root system so that we do not affect the erosion coefficient by removing those very intricate root systems.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And now the applicant. Alec? I want to say Igarola.
Alec Agarola,
Okay.
really close. Can I get some sharing privileges, please?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Sharing privileges to,
Oh, sure. Did you catch that? Sharing privileges?
You can tilt the microphone up if you need. There you go.
Is he able to use, we should see your screen shortly once. Push whatever. But I am- Test. Okay, yeah, you're muted now. Okay. Can you see it? Kevin, do you know what he needs to do?
sorry, it's not pulling up the sharing.
Madam Mayor, if he's logged into Zoom as an attendee and then gets moved over to a panelist, he
is.
should be able to share. his
Yeah,
screen.
you've been moved over to a panelist.
Greg, can we have your help, please?
Start video.
Oh, it looks, nope, that's Holly.
Thank you.
There we go. Well,
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, I'm Alec Agarola, 332 North Broadmoor Way, Nampa, Idaho. I'm Alec, a land use planner with TU Engineers, and I am the applicant and representative for the reserve at Deer Valley and its PUD modification. And I'll be joining my presentation tonight by Jamie Snyder, the landscape architect on the project. And I will also be joined by Dave Sterling and John Carpenter. They are project engineers on site for any engineering related questions or flood study related questions as well. I'd first like to thank Kevin for his time and efforts on the presentation and the staff report and overall project guidance on this PUD modification. And I also like to thank the mayor and the city council for your time and space to hear our purpose for this PUD modification tonight. And I do kindly request to deny the appeal and uphold the PUD modification as previously approved by the P&Z Commission. So I'm going to play a really quick video that we created, a rendering of the reserve at Deer Valley, and just kind of welcoming you into the community as I go over a couple points. So the existing zoning of R1A is to remain as previously approved. And this intent is to complement the existing zoning and land use in the area, while also develop respectively to neighbors, to the city, and to the environment. And overall, this is to improve those site conditions while also reducing impacts that we've been discussing tonight. And with our proposed plan, we initially had 95 total lots approved, and we have reduced that number to 88. And with that reduction of lots, it was 51% open space that was initially approved, and we have increased that to 60%. And initially there were 3 access points at Pierce Park Lane, and we have decreased that to 2, as shown here on this concept plan. And the overall decreased access points at Pierce Park reduces the traffic impacts to this area, as we are going to be improving Pierce Park Lane as required, putting in this development. And setbacks and driveways are another item that we are requesting modification for. All lots are to keep the 20-foot rear and front setbacks as previously approved with the PUD back in 2015, 2016. But we are requesting side setbacks to be a 15-foot total, but a 5-foot minimum on a single side. And the initial plan that was approved was to include shared driveways, and those have also been removed. And both proposed changes to the setbacks and the driveways are due to geotechnical and site characteristics, as there's some grading and topography in the area that we had to work with. And the engineers
going into analysis, digging deeper into this, noticed that we needed some flexibility and room by taking away those driveways and allowing that setback flexibility. So adjacent homes, as shown on this side lot conditions slide here, will have grading feasible for those shared drives. As you see here, the side lot grading will be variable from lot to lot. So that flexible side setback will allow the developer to kind of move the houses best suited to special grading characteristics of the site. And that concludes my portion of the presentation. I'll hand it over to Jamie as she goes further in depth into the landscape plan. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. My name is Jamie Snyder. I'm with TO Engineers. I'm the landscape architect on the project. 332 North Broadmoor Way in Nampa, Idaho, 83687. As Alec mentioned, we're here to present tonight for council and ask for them to uphold the commission's decision to approve the modification as presented to selectively remove invasive species along the banks of the gulch and revegetate with a more native plant palette. As it is the design team's observation that similar to other areas in the Boise foothills, this project site has been invaded by invasive species and peppered with aging and declining trees of health. Many of the invasive species are located within the riparian corridor as well in the uplands. This is leading to a decline in the number of native plants on site, which are vital to the area's wildlife, water, and soil health. As a part of this overall development, we're planning to provide a phased approach to selectively reduce the invasive plant species with as little impact to the riparian zone as possible. Our goals in this project are to reduce and maintain invasive species populations over time, establish a diverse riparian and upland habitat using a diverse palette of native plant species, enhance, protect, and increase the native plant species available to local wildlife, and create a sustainable system that integrates the built environment into the existing habitat. Through the reintroduction of native plants to the project area, it's our intent to provide additional habitat for local wildlife, reduce the presence of insects and pests, and stabilize the soil with extensive, strong root systems of a native plant palette. With their fast growth rate and high seed production in the years since the original approval, numerous pockets of invasive plant species have been able to establish themselves within the banks of the gulch. The design team has taken great care and time to catalog the existing species and their existing conditions throughout the gulch and the uplands of the property. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen a graphic representation of the existing conditions found in pockets along the gulch. The valley floor shows conditions of eroded stream banks and the presence of invasive tree species such as black locust and Siberian elm. Understory weeds such as Canadian thistle, poison hemlock, and whitetop also exist in plentiful numbers throughout the understory. The image on our right is the goal for the project. We aim to create a healthy stream bank with slopes revegetated in native plant material. Reintroducing native species along the stream bank can help us towards our goal to create a sustainable environment by utilizing their beneficial characteristics of native plants, such as their being able to adapt to a region's climate, being able to create deep and extensive root systems for soil stabilization and nutrient absorption, and also provide a diverse habitat and forage opportunities for local wildlife. In opposition, a non-native plant species is often short-lived in their non-native region, and they also reduce complex plant communities with their quick establishment in a monoculture. They also have the ability to clog streams and increase soil erosions with shallow root systems. In addition to the revegetation and mitigation plan for the development, another notable revision, as Alec mentioned, the landscape plan is the increased open space. These CGI images on the screen graphically represent our plan to cluster the footprints of the development in order to maintain large expanses of undeveloped open space. The design team is taking great care in the landscape as a whole to design it with an effort to balance the site's interconnected relationship with history, nature, and its view towards the future. In the following video, you get a bird's eye view of the trail system's passive park areas, trails and boardwalks and overlooks that are meant to enhance and highlight the natural features of Deer Valley. If I can get it to play. So here you can see a clustered development of the houses, leaving large swaths of undeveloped landscape with passive pocket parks above the gulch, trail systems along. Again, cluster developments up above the gulch area. Two small overlooks that overlook the main pond on the right-hand side there of the slope. Another cluster of development above the bank. Trail systems throughout the eastern end. And more cluster development with the trail system heading toward the eastern end of the property. With that, I thank you for your time and I stand for any questions.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, first, I'm a huge advocate for removing invasive species, especially if you can put native species in as well. Was there something about the redevelopment of the plan, the movement of the houses, that created a need to change the landscaping plan from the conditions that were there? I'm trying to figure out what the reason or the motivation was for switching from what was on the plan to what is currently on the plan now.
Madam Mayor, members of council, I think, well, the redistribution of the lots did call for a kind of a harder look at the landscape plan. And then I think when we're doing that, just noting the condition of the gulch, what the condition the gulch was in, and how we could benefit the health of the stream.
And Madam Mayor, just a quick follow-up there. So I guess what I'm trying to, fully understand is it seems like there is you could have left it there. You could have left and continued to follow through with the conditions that were set earlier, but you felt like if you followed through with those conditions that were set earlier, that it actually would be problematic as far as the landscaping that was there. It turned out to be a bigger problem. There was more invasive species that came in. Am I understanding that correctly? That's kind of the reason why?
I believe from the original approval and until now, more invasive species have come into the gulch, and we've also seen a decline in health of some of the species that are there. And so when we took a harder look at that, we thought it would benefit, wildlife health, soil health, water quality, to go in and I kind of say cherry pick things, clean up this, trim that, take out an invasive species while we were in there, and just to benefit the overall community and the neighbors.
Good. That's all I have for now.
Madam Mayor, I have really similar questions. Yeah. We heard earlier tonight that there apparently are some 2015 memos that document the state of the vegetation in the gulch is in good shape. I think at least from our city and maybe from other agencies. And then in your testimony, you've said that there are many things in there, including things like white top and Canada thistle, which are, they're not just invasive species, they're noxious weeds. So either something has changed in the last 5 to 7 years, or the assumptions behind those memos weren't quite right, or I'm just trying to understand what may have happened in the last 5 years or 7 years, or how that could be, because it doesn't seem like a 2015 memo would say that if these noxious weeds are present now or present at the time.
Correct, Madam Mayor, members of council. So the memos that I read, and I apologize, I don't have a date in my head of what the memo was, but there was an overall vegetation report of the property that did state all these noxious weeds that are present in the understory. I apologize, I don't have the date on that, but as you know, seeds blow and they establish over time. And I believe that's what's happened here. And also a lot of the vegetation that's in the gulch, things like black locust and the larger tree species do have a shorter lifespan. And if we go back to one of those historical pictures, they've been there for almost 60 years. So I do believe that just over time, even over 5 years, their health can decline rapidly.
Madam Mayor, one follow-up. My second question, dealing with particularly the noxious weeds part, is you, like your client, like everyone in Ada County, has a duty to remove those weeds from their property. It's illegal to maintain property that has the presence of some of those plant species. So my question is, if the appeal were upheld and the new landscape plan were not approved, would you be able to remove the weeds as you're required to under Ada County code?
You're talking about if the outside of the banks.
Yeah, it just seems like you're between a rock and a hard place, because on the one hand, you have a duty to remove noxious weeds, and you have noxious weeds.
Right.
And then on the other hand, you have a landscaping plan that, at least it appears, may interfere with your ability to do that. And I just want to make sure that I'm reading that right.
I think you're very correct. I think inside, if our appeal, or if the appeal was upheld and we weren't able to get into the banks, I'm not sure we could do anything in there, correct? I mean, that would be saying that we couldn't do anything up there. We could do anything in the upland, but then you kind of continually get those seeds spreading, right? So it just kind of snowballs from there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So just kind of following up on this line of questioning, as I'm looking at the map on page 62 of our packet, the vegetation that you're going to remove is in bits and pieces up and down the gulch, but for the most part, it's not actually down in the water. It's along the upper edges. So back to my question that I asked the appellant, removing these we know is good for the native plant species, but we also know, as the appellant noted, that in some cases they hold the stream bank in place. They create some good as well. So how do you balance that in removing it, how you remove it, how you replace it, the timing of all of that? I was looking for some detail in here about that and I couldn't find it. We talk about a phasing plan, but I didn't see the details of the phasing plan.
Right, Madam Mayor, Council President. So I'm glad you brought that up and had the opportunity to speak on that. So we do want to be very careful in this approach. I kind of describe it as being kind of cherry picking through and going through carefully, and whether that's with a trained arborist or a specialist, and looking at each individual pocket. And like you say on that plan, there's that whole gulch we have not, created in a red cloud to remove everything. What we'd like to do is go through and assess each species. If that black locust, say, was in good health, looked good, looked stable, wasn't going to be a detriment to fall or anything like that, I feel that would be a good candidate to stay. There would be no reason, why we need to take that and destabilize the soil. But maybe the neighboring tree, a black locust that is declining health, is unstable, we take that one, and then continue on, kind of cherry picking our way down the gulch. We don't have a true maintenance plan set out yet, but I do agree it's very important to have in place before we start doing this. And once again, it would be a phased program where we wouldn't do this all at one time. So we would give time for the revegetative plant material to take hold, and then go in and remove a couple more as we go down.
Okay, thank you. Follow up, if I might. Again, back to that map on page 62, it also references, besides the black locust and some of the invasive species, some conifers that you're also planning to remove, even though they're not invasive. Why are you planning to remove those?
Madam Mayor, Council President, I believe those conifers are in a developable or a graded area or a developing lot that needs to be graded. And so that would be the only reason to remove those.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's all for now.
All right, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So next up, Christine Isaacs is not here, correct? So then Marcia Persley. Sure, anybody online? And Marcia, welcome.
Hi. Hi, Madam Mayor and City Council members. I'm Marcia Persley. I live at 7193.
Marcia, will you drop this down, the mic down just a bit? Thanks.
Thanks. I live at 7193 North Pierce Park Road Lane. This development started off, proposal PUD 21, started off on the right foot in its application. It said that their proposal is in the hillside, is in a floodplain, and is a zone A. And so I credit you for being honest and forthright about these three areas. But the very next question we have to ask is, what are the standards in the Boise City Code and in FEMA regs for hillside? Not so much. Floodplain, a lot. And zone A, a lot. These standards have got to be identified. We can't just say that we are going to remove X groves of trees from the valley floor or the top of a bank. This is where the proposal went off track. It's not just a gulch. It's not just the top of a bank. It is actually the top of a floodway or zone A. It is actually the valley floor of a floodway or a zone A. That channel is going to be a 100-year flood. And so you've got to determine what standards. Now, the Clomar response letter to Boise City said that you have to give precedence to your more restrictive floodplain management criteria. You can look it up. It's there. I've seen it a million times. It's in the May 3rd, 2017 letter. So what are the more restrictive floodplain management criteria in the Boise City Code, which is a heck of a good code, in my opinion? Those floodplain management criteria, the more restrictive, are in 1107, 1108, and 1109. But none of them were applied to this proposal. Now, if you want to back off from more restrictive, then you can go with the FEMA regs. Those are in FEMA 60.3. We are a community B type of flood area. And Jeannie enumerated what those standards are. Every proposal, this one too, flood, the landscape, has to contain the base flood elevations. It has to have a special development permit. It has to be evaluated on whether this proposal to remove these trees from the floodway zone A, whether it will make things reasonably safe or whether it will increase the potential for the 100-year flood. And so your questions that some of you have asked are excellent, because this is not a gulch. This is a 100-year flood area. And FEMA has mapped this area as a zone A. It's on the Idaho Department of Water Resources, their flood hazard maps. So we got to get better terminology here, flood related, and better standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. Are there questions for Marcia? Looks like there aren't. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's all we have for public testimony. Because this is an appeal, we then have the applicant rebut first and then the appellant. I want to first give the council opportunity to ask staff any questions you might have now in advance of the final presentations from both parties.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then we'll have council, I think Councilmember Woodings looked like she was about to say something. So first the Council President, and then we'll move on to you, Councilmember Woodings.
Thank you. So Kevin, as the Planning and Zoning Commission considered this, there are a lot of the same questions came up. But as I'm reading through the conditions that were added to this, I don't see any that are specific to a process to develop the phasing plan that was spoken about, or a process to ensure that the flood map work is done before whatever next phase goes forward. Is it reasonable to think that whatever decision comes out of this, that we should specify those in maybe some additional conditions?
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, the process that this is going through, and as I kind of mentioned in that one slide of what the typical steps are, I mean, really that's outlined in code and how we process first entitlements. Then typically we would do a floodplain application. So with this particular modification that we're looking at it through the lens of the PUD approval criteria. We will then, as I stated before, before any dirt is moved, before any permits are looked at, the floodplain development application would then need to be removed. And we look at it through that specific lens of those approval criteria, many of which have been brought up this evening.
Thank you. If I could follow up real quick. So because this is a PUD, the landscaping plan and the specifics of the phasing of that would not come forward until the subdivision plat was filed. Is that what I think I'm hearing?
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, yes, partially. So this PUD landscape plan would inform the final plat, which has been submitted, but it would also require a landscape plan. And as a condition of approval, that final plat will also come before this body as new business when we get to that point. And I believe even, but before that, we would also need the floodplain development permit to be approved. So that's kind of 2 steps away, even from where we're at tonight.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Oh, yes.
I had exactly the same question. So thank you for answering that, Kevin.
Anyone else? All right. Well, with that, we will ask the applicant to come back up for final rebuttal.
So my name is David Sterling with TO Engineers. I was the engineer who did the CLOMAR submittal back in 2015 and 16. So I might be able to help answer some of these questions. So back in 2015 and 16, we met with city staff, and it was determined that we needed to submit a floodplain development permit, and that the city wanted to take the additional step of submitting a CLOMAR, which is a conditional letter of map amendment, to FEMA, so that basically you get FEMA's approval of our proposed improvements, because there was no way to avoid some work in the floodway. We have the road crossing, for instance, that goes across it. And so because we had to get into the floodway, at that time, staff decided that a CLOMAR would be the best way to handle that. And so we submitted that CLOMAR to FEMA. They reviewed it and approved it. And now the next step is to go through final design, submit the final floodplain permit to the city, and then build it, and then submit a LOMAR, a letter of map revision, and then it's LOMAR F because we placed fill in the floodplain, and then that will then submit the construction the as-built construction documents and the survey to then document the new floodway, and then that becomes published in the maps that are out there. Right now, it's just a zone A. It's just a flood hazard, undefined. You had a question earlier about there was some documentations about vegetation from the city. And I don't know exactly what Jim was thinking, but my thought when he was writing that, because he was one of the engineers for the city, was he was probably thinking more about the vegetation as far as like floodplain, right? Like, I don't know if he was necessarily documenting the species, because there certainly was those invasive species back then as well. They might not have been at the same level they are now, but they were present back then. You had a question about erosion during construction. And so part of it is phasing it so that we're not disturbing everything at once. But, the city requires an ESC permit as part of the project. And so we'll have to have an erosion sediment control plan that goes with this. And part of that to restabilize the banks will be the replanting of it, probably some mulch, those type of items to temporarily stabilize it. And then once those plants start to grow up, they'll replace the plants that were removed to hold the bank in place. Those are really the main items I had highlighted. Do you have any questions for me?
Yes.
And so, given what you just said, if the decision were to deny the appeal and uphold, and we recommended added conditions that just outline in our conditions of approval that you'll meet those standards, that you'll come back with LOMR, that you'll have a phasing plan for the vegetation that shows that there won't be significant erosion, those kinds of things. That's what you would have to do anyway. Is that correct?
Yeah, the city's process requires that we submit a LOMR F once we build it to actually, update the maps, the FEMA maps. And then the city requires erosion and sediment control permit as part of any of our work out there. So we would have to get those anyway. But I mean, you can make it a condition, but we would have to do those.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
And next up, we'll see Jeannie Hines again as the appellant.
Madam Mayor and Boise City Council. There is a logical path for the development project such as this, and it starts with a thorough site inventory and analysis, and a development plan should be designed around the findings. This includes detailed slope, soil, wetland, floodplain, and vegetation studies. The city requires these studies to inform the design of development so that they have minimal negative impacts on the environment and surrounding homeowners. We, as homeowners living adjacent to the reserve at Deer Valley, are studying the regulatory aspects and the technical aspects of this planning process. We depend on the city's planning and development staff, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the City Council to examine these technical issues to ensure that these development proposals provide a net benefit to Boise and do not adversely impact adjacent property owners. We are in agreement that the development engineers, the regulatory bodies of the city of Boise, and the city staff and concerned citizenry can be transparent, exchange public information that can support lawful development. Failure to follow the prescribed process leaves all of us homeowners feeling very unsettled.
Thank you. Questions? Nope. All right. Well, with that, then, any further questions for staff before I close the hearing?
Madam Mayor,
Mhm.
I guess I do have a couple questions for staff. I've heard this, I think, a number of different times, and I just want to make sure that I kind of have it perfectly clear. With the conditions that are already in place and the procedures that we already follow, it seems like the staff is telling us that all the necessary steps will have to be done, and everything will be checked off to get all of the plans approved. Am I understanding that correctly?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, that is correct.
And then, Madam Mayor, just a quick follow-up. So in addition to that, the concerns that were just brought up as far as the technical details and the plans that the city is required to follow, what I'm hearing from staff and what it looked like I was hearing from the Planning and Zoning Commission as well, is that all the technical steps were followed along the lines to this point so far. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, up until this point, they are, yes. And there's still plenty to go, I think is probably the key point there as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Madam Mayor. Thank you. So two things. Condition 4 was the one that referenced not removing any vegetation was changed to allow the removal of invasive species. But there was no description of a process to get to how you would do that. Would it be reasonable to rewrite that condition to specify that there has to be a phasing plan, a landscaping plan in order to do that?
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, yeah, that would be certainly reasonable. I think we could rewrite that condition so that with the final plat submittal, that still will come before you, that a phasing plan and along with the landscape plan is submitted with kind of with the detail of how that phasing plan would function.
Okay, thank you. And then in the original conditions of approval, number 4 under miscellaneous engineering conditions just stated that a portion of the property is within the floodplain and that the development must comply with the Boise City Floodplain Ordinance 1108. I'm hearing, I think from you that you're comfortable that that ensures that all of the floodplain issues will be met. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move that we deny the appeal in PUD 2124.
We have a motion?
Second.
Madam Mayor.
Yep.
Would ask the maker of the motion if he's willing to ask staff to return with new condition 4 that expounds on the process for removing the invasive species.
Madam Mayor, I don't have any problem with that. The reason I didn't include it was that I understood from the staff that that wouldn't actually require any additional work or require any additional documentation or procedure creation. So I didn't understand exactly why it was necessary, but I knew that you were going to ask. And so maybe you can help me understand.
Madam Mayor, I would point out that having sat on the other side of the dais, as a citizen, I often rely on what's in the ruling that this body makes to know what it is to expect. And just saying that they're allowed to remove the invasive species, even though the staff knows there's a process to do that and that there will be an outcome that will include a landscaping plan and a phasing plan, doesn't give me as a citizen really the knowledge I need to be able to follow that development as it meets those landmarks, if you will. So I think for me, putting that in there is just a goodwill for citizens to be able to more transparently understand what it is we're asking.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have any problem with amending or changing the motion to rewrite condition 4 to include a phasing plan and a landscaping plan as part of the effort to satisfy what needs to be done to remove vegetation.
All right, so we've amended the motion. Discussion?
Madam Mayor, I wasn't here the first time this came before council, and that's not really the decision we're up here to make. We're really up here to approve or deny appeal, and I don't see anything that hasn't been addressed that would cause me to uphold the appeal at this point. So I'll be voting in favor of the motion. And then I also just wanted to make a quick note that I think somebody left their sunglasses or eyeglasses up at the podium.
Madam Mayor, Council President Halliburton reminds me that I didn't actually explain the basis of my motion. I just amended it and proceeded. So the basis of the motion is that this is an appeal where we have a standard that we have to apply. And I agreed with the staff report fully as to its analysis of the appeal standard and why the requirements weren't met. The only additional argument that we heard tonight, apart from what was argued on paper, was that the Planning and Zoning Commission erred by not fully considering the implications of its decision. I think the phrase was fully assess the potential impacts of the amendments. But when I read the Planning and Zoning Commission's transcript, they discussed the amendments at length. They received a lot of testimony about them. They asked questions about them. They considered them. And to my eye, they certainly fully considered them. And I certainly can't say they were arbitrary or capricious or disregarded evidence in their consideration of them. So that's the basis of my motion.
Madam Mayor. Thank you. I was here when this was heard the first time and actually applaud both the developer and the neighborhood for recognizing that ultimately having a strong plant regime in the bottom of this floodway is going to be better for everyone. I think there's an opportunity to get there in a way that works well. And my request to modify the motion was actually in recognition of the discussion that I read as I read the testimony and the transcript at the Planning and Zoning Commission that I didn't feel was adequately reflected in the very simple condition that was added. And so I agree with Councilmember Bajan and Councilmember Halliburton that this issue was fully vetted, fully considered, and hopefully this will clarify what was heard and decided at that first hearing.
All right, with that, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carried.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.